For some people, getting a job as a park ranger, either with the National Park System or with the Forestry Service, is a dream come true. But as the following stories are going to illustrate, sometimes the line between dream and nightmare is pretty thin. This story comes from a ranger named Kay. She and her group were on a well-mapped side of a mountain where they were practicing high elevation belaying. Now, belaying is a climbing technique that involves a climber's partner holding tension on a rope that's attached to the climber. That way, if the climber falls, they won't fall very far. They're practicing all morning, and they finally get to a midday meal break. And Kay decides she's got some business to do. So she walks off the trail about 50 yards to go do her business. So once she's done and she's ready to rejoin the group, she starts going back, but she only gets like 5 feet before she realizes she's lost. And not like I just can't find the path that I came in on lost. Kind of like what am I doing here lost? I mean, she has no idea where she is. She doesn't even know what state she's in. So she's standing there totally lost, and she's trying to figure out what it is that she's even supposed to do. But she realizes that the longer she stands there, the more confused that she's getting. So she realizes she just has to start walking. She just has to pick a direction and go. And as she's going, it's getting worse and worse, and to the point where she has no idea why she's even on the mountain anymore. And then she starts to hear a voice kind of in her head, kind of like if a frog could talk. And it was all kind of low and croaky sounding. And it was saying, it's okay. It's okay. All you need to do is find something to eat. Just eat. Eat. So she starts looking around for something to eat, and she realizes she's never been so hungry in her entire life. It's like her stomach is like a bottomless pit. That's now all she can think about is finding something to eat. Now, she has no concept of time, so she has no idea how long she's been out there when she hears the voice of a fellow park ranger, somebody from the search and rescue unit. And he's running at her, and he looks terrified. He runs at her and he's asking, "Are you okay? What are you doing out here?" So as he's running toward her, Kay, without even really thinking about it, sees herself pulling her hunting knife out of her belt. And she's thinking to herself, I just have to eat. If I don't eat something, I will never be okay again. I just have to eat. Now the search and rescue guy sees her pulling out the knife, and so he backs off and says, Hey, what are you doing? Put the knife away. I'm here to help. I'm not gonna hurt you. And something about that snaps Kay back into reality. She knows exactly where she is, and she puts the knife away and goes running to him and says, how long have I been gone? And she's thinking he's gonna say like a half an hour or something. And he tells her she has been gone for 2 days. And not only has she been gone for 2 days, but she has gone over 2 peaks and almost to the other side of the mountain. And had they not run into her, she would have eventually run into 300 miles of dense forest. They never would have found her. And of course, she doesn't know what to think. To her, no time has passed at all. But she doesn't say anything. She just goes back with them back to the rendezvous point and eventually to HQ, where she is airlifted to the hospital to make sure that she's okay. And when she gets there, they run all kinds of tests to try to figure out what happened. And as best as they can guess, it was some kind of fugue state, which is kind of like amnesia, or maybe just a small seizure that put her brain out of whack for a little while. It never happened again, but now she never goes into the woods alone. And people give her a hard time about having to go with her when she has to leave the group for any reason. But she just tells them that listening to her pee is better than losing her for 2 days on a freezing mountain. One beautiful sunny day, a mom and her kids were having a picnic in a park next to a small lake. There were 3 kids. One was 6, one was 5, one was 3, and they're running around having fun. And mom says that she was watching them very closely the whole time. And the whole time that they were there, she saw nobody else in the park. But pretty soon it's time to go home. So she packs up all their stuff and they start heading down the trail, which is about 2 miles down to the parking area through the forest. But it's a really well-established trail. Unless you went off the trail on purpose, it would be very difficult to get lost on this trail. So off they go down the path to the parking lot. And they're walking and all of her kids are in front of her. And the mom all of a sudden thinks that she hears somebody walking behind them, which is kind of weird because they haven't seen anybody all day. So she takes a look around to see if she can find somebody behind there. And in the 3 or 4 seconds that she's turned around, her 5-year-old has vanished. Now she's thinking, he's 5 years old. Maybe he stepped off the path because he had to take a leak or something. So she asked the other 2 kids, well, where did he go? And both kids said, the big man with the scary face came out, took his hands, and led him back into the trees. Now, the 2 kids were not scared at all. In fact, she said that it was kind of like they were drugged. They were all kind of spacey and fuzzy. But she, on the other hand, freaks out and starts screaming for her kid. She's looking for her kid. But she can't do anything. She can't go anywhere because she has the other 2 that she needs to take care of. So she does the only thing that she can do, and that is pull out her phone and call the police. And search and rescue, they respond right away and start a search for the child immediately. Now, over the course of this search, which was huge and spanned miles, they could never find a trace of the kid. The canines couldn't pick up a scent. They never found any broken branches, anything that would have signified a kid somewhere out in those woods. Now, of course, first suspicion fell on the mother, but she was so destroyed that it became evident very quickly that she had nothing to do with this. And the search went on for weeks with lots of volunteers. But eventually they found nothing, so the search just kind of petered out. Volunteers, however, did continue to search on their own. And one day, the search and rescue unit got a phone call that a body had been located and needed to be brought down from the mountain. One of those volunteers was out looking one day and decided he would go to a place where he didn't think that anybody had searched, just in case a body had been brought there to be dumped, because there's no way that a child would have gotten there on their own. And as he's going along, he comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope. And he looks up and he can see something up there. So he pulls out his binoculars and takes a look. And sure enough, there's the kid stuffed in kind of a rocky outcrop. And he recognizes the color of the shirt, so he knows right away that is the child that they've been looking for. The search and rescue unit took almost an hour to get the boy's body down, and they just couldn't believe what they were seeing. Not only was it 15 miles from where he had gone missing, but there's no way that he could have gotten up there all by himself. I mean, even the search and rescue people with all of their climbing gear, it's hard for them to get up to that spot. So there's no way that a 5-year-old boy is going to do that on his own. And not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. He's missing his shoes, but his feet aren't damaged and they're not even dirty. So it's not like an animal dragged him up there. And from what they can tell, he hadn't been dead for that long. He'd been out in the wilderness for over a month, but it didn't look like he'd been dead more than a day or 2. They found out from the coroner that the boy had died of exposure. He'd probably frozen to death late at night 2 nights before they had found him. There were never any suspects and never any more answers. So a call comes into the search and rescue unit that an older woman has fainted on the trail and she needs some help getting down off the trail and back down into the main area. So search and rescue pack up their gear and off they go onto the trail. They meet up with the husband who runs to them. He's freaking out. He tells search and rescue that he was just a little ways off the path. He was looking at something and he hears his wife screaming behind him. So he runs back to her and there she is passed out on the trail. So search and rescue personnel get her on a backboard and they hike her back down the mountain, back down to the welcome center, and the woman comes to and starts screaming again. They get her calmed down and they ask her what happened. And she says she was waiting for her husband and she started hearing this noise off in the woods and it sounded like a cat. But there was something wrong about it. And she couldn't quite put her finger on it. So she went a little ahead to try to get a little closer to maybe try and make out what this thing was. And as she did that, she said the sound got a little closer to her. And as it got closer, she got a little bit more uneasy because she figured out why it didn't sound right. It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying meow, meow, meow over and over again. Meow, meow. Except it wasn't a man, she said, because she's never heard a voice sound all buzzy like that. She actually thought maybe it was her hearing aid, so she adjusted her hearing aid, and that didn't help. It was still this buzzy noise. She said it was just awful, but she couldn't see him. She could hear him getting closer, but she couldn't see him. And the closer that he got, the more scared that she got, until the last thing that she can remember is a figure coming out of the woods. And that's when she fainted. Now, one search and rescue guy in particular is a little perplexed about why there would be a guy out in the woods yelling meow, meow, meow at people. So he asks his superior if he can go ahead and head back up and check it out. And his superior says fine. And the guy grabs a radio and heads back up the trail to where they had just picked up the woman. When he gets up there, he doesn't see anything. So he decides to keep going. He goes about another mile up the trail. Still nothing. Can't see anything. Can't hear anything. So on the way back, he decides to go off trail a little bit. Maybe try to figure out where she could have seen a figure coming out of the trees. But it's getting pretty close to sunset at this point, and he has no desire to be out in the woods alone at night. So he just kind of writes it off and makes a mental note to come back and check tomorrow. So as he's coming back, he hears something in the distance. He calls out to anybody in the area to immediately identify themselves, and nothing answers. And the sound didn't come any closer or get any louder, but it sounded just like a man saying meow, meow, meow in this really odd monotone. And the park ranger says that as comical as it sounds, it almost sounded like the character from South Park, Electrolarynx Ned.
Hi, Ned.
So he heads off trail to try to locate where the sound is coming from. And he never gets any closer. And he says it actually kind of sounds like it's coming from everywhere. But eventually, the sound just kind of fades away, and he finds himself back at the Welcome Center. He never got any more reports like that. And even though he went back to check out that area, he never heard that sound again. This story is from a ranger who once led a trip to the top of Mount Sterling in North Carolina. It's a pretty tough climb to the top, and it's about 6 miles from the nearest road. He was hiking up the hill with 8 middle school kids and 1 other adult. Now, they were camped out on the top of the mountain, and the moon was full, so there's lots of moonlight. And the kids and the other adult decided to go to sleep in their tents. But he chose to sleep in a hammock that night. There was a book that he had that he was really into, so he wanted to go into the hammock and stay up late and read for a while. Now, around 10:30, he decides it's time to go to bed, so he switches off his headlamp. And he's looking around, and everything is kind of relatively lit up from the moonlight. And he's got a perfect view of the direction that they came up from the mountain and all of that vista scenery there. So he's laying there, soaking in the beauty of the scenery. And he notices something moving on the trail. And at first he thinks it's a bear, because bears are quite common there. So he perks up a little bit. But then he notices it's not a bear. It's a man. They're in the middle of nowhere, and there's a man hiking up the trail with no light and no gear. He sits there frozen as he watches this man hiking up closer and closer to their camp. The man arrived at the top of the mountain where all the campers were and just stopped. And from what the ranger could see in the moonlight, he appeared to just be surveying the camp. And he just stood there staring at them. The ranger said he stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes, but maybe it was only 10. He couldn't tell. And then the man just turned around and sat down under a tree facing the camp. And it's not like he sat down trying to go to sleep or something. He sat down there and was staring at the camp. Now, the ranger didn't know what to do. He was just kind of frozen in his hammock. So he decided to just kind of wait it out and see what happens. So he just sat there staring at the guy who was staring at their camp. And this went on until about 3:30 in the morning. At that point, the man stands up takes a few more minutes to survey the camp, and then turns around and heads back down the trail. To this day, he has no idea who that person was or what they wanted, but he did say he had the feeling that they were being followed for the rest of the trip. About 3 years after this ranger had joined the United States Forest Service, they were getting some calls that people were reporting a wolf in the area with a collar on it. Kinda strange. A, there aren't usually wolves in that area, and B, wolves don't usually have collars. But none of those calls had mentioned any violent behavior. So the ranger departs his station about noon and goes to the places where this wolf has been sighted. So he's wandering out and about for about 3 hours when he decides it's time to take a break. So he sits down, has a snack, drinks some water, and he's getting ready to get up and go again when he sees the wolf about 20 feet away, just inside the tree line. Now, it looked friendly enough, so the ranger whistles and it comes running over. And as it gets closer, he can see by the body type that it's not a wolf, but it's huge, so he could see where people would be making that mistake. So he gets on his radio and says that he has the dog and he'll bring it in. But as soon as he says he's going to bring it in, the dog takes off. Like he was wondering how far he could get the ranger to chase him. Typical dog behavior. So he goes after it and they play this little chase game for about 5 minutes through all the forest until it comes to a clearing and the dog kind of slows down and starts pacing around a particular spot. So he comes in closer to where the dog is, and with the overgrowth, he almost doesn't see it, but then he sees it. And it appears to be bones. So the park ranger calls it in, and another team comes out to recover those remains. But when he went to retrieve the dog is nowhere to be found. But he figures, the dog is friendly enough, we'll catch up with him later. The bones were identified as those of a teenage male who died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And he'd been reported missing long before the ranger even became a ranger, and they had totally lost all hope of any remains of him being found. Now, the mom of the teenage victim actually called the ranger to say thank you for finding my son. So she asked him, how did you find him? So he started talking about how this black dog kind of led him there. And then he thought he said something wrong because there was an odd pause on the other side of the phone. So after he gave her some more details about the dog, the mom explained to the ranger that her son had had trouble making connections and had fallen into a pretty deep depression after the death of his best friend, his dog, the very dog that had led the ranger to his remains. So this park ranger had the unenviable task of repainting an information booth. So he's out there all by himself in the middle of nowhere, up on a ladder, repainting this information booth, when he hears somebody behind him ask for directions to the nearest campsite. Well, he couldn't really turn around where he was on the ladder, so he just told the person that there's no camping here. But if you go back down the road, back about 4 miles, you'll find some campsites in another park. Now, the ranger asked if there's anything else that he can do to help him, but the man says no, thank you. And so the ranger just keeps on painting. But he never hears the man leave. Now, he says that the second that man came up and started talking to him, the hair on the back of his neck just stood up, and he wasn't really sure why. He thought maybe it was because he couldn't really turn around to look at him, but he just felt like something about him was off. He just had this really uneasy feeling about the whole thing. He just wanted to finish painting and get out of there. And there was also this weird smell kind of floating around. He said it smelled like old blood. And he kind of tried to look around and see if he could find a source for that, but he couldn't find it. So he waited for the guy to walk away. He was listening, but he never heard the guy leave, which then made him just feel like the guy was just standing there watching him. So he asked again, is there anything I can do to help you? But there was no answer. But he knew he was there because he hadn't heard him leave. So he kind of awkwardly turned around on the ladder to see what the guy was doing. Now, he fully admits that in this moment, maybe he had some kind of brain cramp, but he swears for a split second that man had no face. Like it was almost concave and totally smooth. He says he almost had a heart attack because he couldn't wrap his brain around what it was that he was seeing. But then in the next instant, he said it was like his brain just kind of went pop and there was a normal human being standing there. He must have had some kind of crazy look on his face because the guy asked him, "Are you okay?" And the ranger said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he asked the ranger about the campsite again. And the ranger points to where he has to go. And the camper says, "Well, but I'm not really from around here. Can you help me get there?" And this is where the ranger knows that really there's something up. Because there's no way that he got out that far without knowing where he was. And for that matter, there's no car around. So how did the guy get there to begin with? So the ranger says, "I'm sorry, but I can't take you anywhere in a company vehicle." And the guy's like, "Please, can't you just help me figure out where it is that I'm going? Can't you help me get there?" So now the ranger is like really weirded out, thinking that maybe this is some kind of ambush or something. So the ranger tells him he can call him a taxi or something. And he pulls out his phone and he starts to dial. And the guy says, No, that's okay. And he starts to walk away really fast. But he doesn't walk out of the park. He walks back into the trees. So the ranger says, nope, gets in his truck and he says, "Screw the painting. I am out of here." And as he starts driving away, he starts looking in his mirrors so he can see where is this guy. And he sees him in his mirror, watching from the tree line. And he knows for a fact this time that he had no face. And he just stood there and watched the ranger leave. And right before the ranger took a corner, the man walked into the tree line and dissolved. The ranger said maybe because it was dark, maybe he just blended in, but it felt like he just melted away. If you guys enjoyed our park ranger stories today, feel free to go down below and hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode of The In Between.